Welcome to Hunted and Haunted, Evidence and Echoes. I'm Corey. On this show, Hunted examines crimes committed by people. Haunted explores the places left behind where history lingers and the past refuses to stay silent. Tonight, we're standing in a place built to correct people and remembering how many times it failed. This episode contains discussion of imprisonment, psychological distress, isolation, violence, and death. Listener discretion is advised. Hunted and Haunted, Evidence and Echoes. Alcatraz Island, the rock that remembers. The ferry cuts through the fog like it's breaking a rule. San Francisco fades behind you, swallowed by mist, and ahead, a dark shape rises from the water. Alcatraz. The wind is sharper here, the air feels heavier, and before your feet ever touch the ground, there's a sense you're arriving somewhere that never truly let anyone leave. Because prisons don't just hold bodies, they hold fear, regret, and the echoes of people who learned what silence sounds like when it's weaponized. This is Alcatraz, and even now, long after the cells are empty, something still walks the corridor. Alcatraz sits isolated in San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water and relentless currents. Long before it became a federal penitentiary, the island served as a military fort and later as a military prison, already a place defined by confinement. From 1934 to 1963, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary housed inmates the system deemed unmanageable, men who couldn't be controlled anywhere else. There was no focus on rehabilitation, no interest in redemption. The isolation was the punishment. Freedom was always just visible and always unreachable. And nowhere on the island embodied that cruelty more than D Block. D Block and the Hull. D Block was where punishment lived. Inside it was the Hull, solitary confinement cells designed to remove light, sound, and human contact. Men were left in there for days, sometimes weeks. Guards later admitted that the screaming didn't always stop when prisoners were removed. Long after Alcatraz closed, visitors began reporting something strange. Cold spots that don't move, whispers without a source, a crushing pressure in the chest as if space itself remembers what happened there. The Battle of Alcatraz, 1946. In May of 1946, Alcatraz became something it had never officially been before, a battlefield. Inmates Bernard Coy, Joseph Kretzer, and Marvin Hubbard launched the most violent escape attempt in the prison's history. They overpowered guards, they seized firearms, they barricaded themselves inside the cell house. But the final key jammed. The island locked them inside. What followed was a 2-day siege. Gunfire echoed throughout the cell house. Grenades were dropped through the roof, concrete shattered, and steel twisted. Coy was killed during the fighting. Kretzer and Hubbard died later from their injuries. 2 guards were also mortally wounded. No one escaped. Damage from the explosion is still visible today. Scars that are left behind in stone. After the battle, reports of heightened aggression, panic, and unrest began clustering in specific areas of the island. Not sadness, not quiet, just unfinished violence. The escapers. Between 1934 and 1963, there were 14 escape attempts from Alcatraz involving 36 inmates. 23 were caught alive, 6 were shot and killed, 2 drowned, and 5 were listed missing, presumed drowned. That number matters. June 1962. On the night of June 11th, 1962, 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin, carried out the most famous escape attempt in the prison's history. They carved through their cell walls using improvised tools. They placed fake heads molded from soap and toothpaste in their beds. They stitched together a raft made of raincoats. And under cover of darkness, they disappeared into the bay. Their bodies were never found. For decades, officials maintained that the men drowned in the frigid waters. But the case was never airtight. No remains were recovered. Personal items linked to the Anglin brothers later surfaced. Family members report receiving postcards and photographs from South America. In 2013, the US Marshals reopened the investigation. In 2018, a letter surfaced claiming Frank Morris was alive in Brazil. The case was administratively closed in 2020, but not conclusively solved. Officially, no one is confirmed to have escaped from Alcatraz. Unofficially, 3 men were never accounted for. Alcatraz was built on certainty, and these men leave behind a question. Alcatraz held fewer than 1,600 inmates, but their names still echo. Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, Alvin Karpis. Different men, different crimes, the same result. Inmate vignette, Al Capone. Al Capone arrived in Alcatraz in 1934. Unlike most inmates, he was given a comparatively comfortable cell. A real bed, steady work, and routine meant to keep him compliant. And yet, something still unravelled. Capone took up the banjo. Not for entertainment, but for protection. He told guards he was being followed, that voices spoke to him at night. The cell house wasn't empty after lights out. He believed the ghost of a man he ordered killed was haunting him. Night after night, the banjo played, slow, deliberate, and defensive. By this time, Capone was suffering from advanced neurosyphilis. Shortly before his death, a doctor would later say that Capone had, quote, the mind of a 12-year-old, end quote. Were the ghosts real? Did the isolation strip away his ability to tell the difference? Either way, his fear was real. And fear, repeated long enough in a place like Alcatraz, leaves an imprint. Investigative findings. When the Ghost Adventures crew conducted an overnight investigation, their findings mirrored decades of visitor and staff reports. Sudden, isolated cold spots, particularly in D Block, unexplained metallic knocks, electronic voice phenomena responding directly to questions, overwhelming emotional heaviness, grief, panic, and pressure. Not spectacle, consistency. Different people, different equipment, same location, same sensation. The last prisoner. When Alcatraz closed in 1963, there was no ceremony. One of the final prisoners to leave was Frank Weatherman. Years later, when asked what Alcatraz had been like, he simply said, Alcatraz was never no good for nobody. No poetry, no myth, just truth. Personal reflection walking around the island. When I visited Alcatraz, it was a warm November day, but breezy like the bay always is. I walked the island slowly, amazed that people actually lived here, and that human beings survived this place. I remember thinking, how did they not go crazy? And then realised, well, maybe they did. Most of the island felt heavy, but manageable, until I walked into the cafeteria. The temperature changed, and it was hot, unnaturally so. There weren't many people inside at the time, but the room felt crowded, packed. The air was thick and hard to move through, and it was like holding on to something. I stepped back outside and everything was changed. The air felt lighter, cooler, and the breeze returned. Whatever was inside that room didn't follow. I can't explain what it was. I only know it wasn't normal. Occupation of Alcatraz. In November 1969, the occupation of Alcatraz began. A group known as the Indians of all tribes took control of the island, citing broken treaties that allowed used federal land to be reclaimed by indigenous peoples. For 19 months, Alcatraz was no longer a prison. It became a place of voices. Classes were held, proclamations were issued. Centuries of Eurasia were forced into public view. The occupation didn't erase the island's trauma, but it changed the conversation. Where silence had once been enforced, it was finally broken, by choice. Alcatraz doesn't feel angry, it feels tired. Like a place that witnessed too much and was never allowed to forget. Prisons don't hold people, they hold memories. And when memory has nowhere to go, it echoes. Alcatraz still stands in the bay, quiet, watchful, unchanged. Not because it's haunted by ghosts, but because it's built on isolation, suffering, and silence. And silence, when it's forced long enough, learns how to speak back. I'm Corey, and this has been Hunted and Haunted, Evidence and Echoes.